Good morning. Good morning. Good earlier morning. I see a few people got on. It's a different time slot. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. 10 o'clock this morning. I knew that was going to be a bit tough. Here we go. Good morning, Tara. Good to see you. Good morning, Martha. Good to see you. Nice and sunny, huh? We are not having a sunny day here. We'll see what happens. It's early still at 10. Linda, good to see you. Kaz, good to see you. Jennifer, hello. We'll see how it goes. I hope I didn't screw up. Because there are some people on, I guess it's fine. It's just the different time slots confusing, isn't it? But I thought, let's run the show anyway, obviously, because, yeah, it's just in the summer when I'm trying to get the kids going to do some stuff a little bit later. I don't like to do it in the middle of the day because it kind of kills the day by splitting it like right in half. At least now the kids are quite, I would say, and I would not say wild. I say they are huge button pushers this morning. So I am looking forward. We're at my mom's house. As you can see, I'm in a different setting. They are pushing buttons like crazy. So I am anxious to get them out the door to the playground or the pond or something because they're doing that thing like she looked at me. She looked at me again kind of thing. Whew, Kirsten, good to see you from cool Vermont. It is cool. I hope summer, no, I mean, I'm very happy if crazy extreme weather does not happen, but I hope summer is not quite over at the very first days of August. The next couple days for us anyway look like they're going to be pretty cool, more like fall days. So unexpected, but good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to see you. Very happy that you're here. I have a few. One of the reasons I'm over here with my mom earlier in the week is so that I don't miss Jocelyn's writing again on Wednesday. But also she's helping me with all of the kits for the classes. I've got like 45 kits to put together for the next like immediate future, and constantly a balancing act, Linda. It's just constant. And everything is a moving target because now, like, there's not great numbers for people who are not well. I don't want to say any trigger words, so I don't even know what we're doing later this month with school and all that stuff now because work has been canceled for people going back. Even here in Connecticut, everything is up for grabs right now. It's just tricky. But yeah, so I came over. My mom's helping me with winding. That's one of the things that I don't personally need to do, and she's happy to help with. So she just wound these skeins this morning, and I thought they were looking beautiful, so I set them up as a prop. We'll see if they last, but she's got a bunch going. These are different sets, but I've got like 2 new sets that I'm introducing for the in-person classes. As a reminder, this coming Saturday, I'll be at Madison Wool in Madison, Connecticut. It's a great class that we do both punch needle, that includes the punch needle, and rug hooking, that includes the rug hook. And I have a pattern for each, but I also have a backup for each. So for example, for each one, if someone says, I'm not really into turtles, or it's too late in the summer to do the turtles, there's a different pattern. And then same thing for the other one, the carousel prim horse, there's a backup one. So there's 2, I'm doing 2 sets for each person. So it's creating a lot of work, but I think it's the best thing to do as far as choices go. So we have got a lot going on this morning. It feels like it must be the weekend and it's only Tuesday. Thanks, Martha. Yeah, I'm breaking them up, trying to introduce a few fall colors, you know. There's a lot more downstairs. There's honestly probably 100 more skeins that she's helping me with the rolling of. Jenny, good to see you. It's a lot of work, but she loves to stand and do something mechanical. She finds it very relaxing. I find it maddening because I can't stop thinking about all of the other things that need doing. So it's perfect when we do this as long as the kids behave. My camera's playing up too. Yeah, I forgot to tell you yesterday. It's so funny. You know, life is just so funny lately. When I went to that flea market this weekend, I didn't have the kids with me. I was looking for rugs, which I didn't find, but I did find a bunch of VHS videotapes, remember? And they were all Godzilla, which is something that Teddy's very into. And the guy said, well, if you buy all the Godzilla tapes, I'll throw in the free TV that was honestly about this big. Remember the kinds of TVs you would put like in the kitchen, like maybe a 4 or 5 inch screen? And it had a built-in VHS player that was about as wide as the thing was, right? The screen was tiny. And I thought, why not? I'll get the tapes and then you throw that in, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll have to find a VCR. So I brought it back and the kids went out of their minds with excitement. And I put this tiny TV at the end of the dining room table, and they both moved like real uncomfortable dining room chairs way to the opposite end, you know, where the screen is now like this big, like a postage stamp. in the distance, and they're sitting there like this, side by side, staring at this tiny screen, playing a VHS tape of Godzilla versus Mothra. And I just thought, God, all things do come around again, don't they? Because to them, this is super interesting and fun. They were making TikTok videos about sitting there watching a 1960s Godzilla movie on TV that was like this big. All things come around again. It's so strange, isn't it? Out of all the technology that they have, it's so strange that that would even hold their interest for 5 seconds. Never mind the entire movie. Funny. Ursula, good to see you. Oh, you're writing from Chile. Great to see you. Welcome. And Joy, good morning. Good to see you, Cindy. Good morning. So I'm just so I'm so worked up about this book. I'm just beyond worked up because this book is so, the fact that the Alice Butler book that we started yesterday, the fact that it is written by her son Vic, and that they work together on many of these rugs, not all of these rugs. As I went along, I found, you'll hear today, she does some alone and she does some with Merle, her husband. But the fact that it's written by, hey Kaz, by Vic is like, to me, a really nice touch because number one, it's emotional, it's nostalgic, it's personal. But number two, he was the designer and not the rug hooker. So the way he puts across rug hooking as an activity, Teddy, I'm recording a show. You want to come say hi real quick? He's a bit edgy, maybe not a bit edgy. Come on up, it's okay, come in the room and do your thing. Just don't be talking crazy on the stairs. The fact that it's written by her son, who is not a rug hooker, it's very sort of layman's terms. And not only that, but the things that he thinks to tell us are interesting because he's not a rug hooker. So you'll see what I mean as we get some traction going on this episode. The more I read it, the more charmed I am by it. And I feel like the chronology that he gives us in this book is the most natural, organic, and obvious kind of timeline that he can do us. Remember, he's trying to show us the rugs in chronological order, but he's not sure because she often worked on multiple, and just time has gone by and memory, and it's been a long time. Sometimes do you ever think to yourself, when you try to think of something that, sideline, something that happened a long time ago, do you ever have that thought, is my memory going, or was it just so long ago that it's hard to remember? Do you ever have that thought? Because I think that all the time. Is my memory going, or was it just that it was 45 years ago? You know what I mean? Interesting. But I think that's part of, hey Dave, good to see you. Welcome. I think that's part of the charm of this book. So let's dive back into it. It is so interesting. It is so interesting. It really makes me wish that I could time travel and be in California and be in the Butler house and watch this interaction between mother and son designing, mother taking all of her cues from him, but him really avidly sort of helicopter watching what she's doing and making really particular design and color choices as she goes. So she is, I don't want to say puppet, that's the wrong word, but she is, you want to say hi real quick? Got the other little bunny rabbit here. Don't trip on the cord. Good morning from Joss, the Raggle-Taggle Gypsy. We're working on this book today. Go get yourself together or we'll go swimming. So anyway, so they're in Tacoma. They're in Tacoma, Washington at this point in 1951, so the very early 1950s. Now, he was talking about how, as he got a little bit older and went away to school, he wouldn't be there constantly, and she would hold on projects because she was stuck, and she needed him to come back and help out with color or with decisions because she, for whatever reason, trusted him more or wanted that collaboration to stay the same. So she would wait for the sort of final word from Vic. So that is a new kind of dynamic to their designing. He says, occasionally when I needed special colors, especially in the yellow, orange to brilliant orange shades, Alice, his mom, would pick up white or nearly white fabric, and we would dye these pieces by boiling RIT dye, R-I-T, RIT dye. Now, this is interesting because, of course, he's dictating the color choices. He is the colorist, 100%. But when he's not finding the colors that he wants among her giant moth-proof closet that Merle, the husband, built, She is actually using RIT dye to dye. And I thought that was interesting because I noticed that somebody this week, I think, Colleen, I think it might have been you, put a post about RIT dye in a yard sale. And it was like, does anybody use RIT dye? And when I saw those packages, I remembered using RIT dye like in the 70s, 80s with my mom, who was a big batik person then with the resist wax. And I thought, man, I have not seen that packaging for a long time. But RIT dye still exists, of course, and they do a neon color range that's very different than anybody else's. And it's perfectly fine to use RIT dye. It is not quite as sort of industrial strength as other chemical dyes, but it works. It works fine. There's no reason to reject it for any reason. So I was just thinking, interesting that they do not have, as in the Midwest, they were using the diamond dyes. In the East, we were certainly using Cushing dyes. In California, there is not an obvious go-to dye that they go to, so they just go to the pharmacy and get RIT, and it worked great. So you can see they had yellows and oranges. So I thought, oh, interesting. There were times when Alice might say, I have an overabundance of such and such a color. Design something where I can begin to use it up. So this is interesting too, because design choices will begin to revolve around her having like too much of something taking up too much room. And then she'll think to herself, you know, I really need to get rid of the reds or the browns. Do something next that involves getting rid of a ton of that bulk. Catherine, good to see you. Beautiful day in New Hampshire. Oh, I'm so glad. I wish I was in New Hampshire. It's where I feel like being today. That would be nice. So interesting. And then the results of this are that there are a lot of little beige rugs, for example. You know, because she bought all of her fabric, except for the white that she dyed with RIT at thrift stores, she would end up with a lot of colors that she wasn't super interested, thank you, in having. So now this is interesting. This is the charm of this book. He says, we would start with a piece of burlap cut to the dimension of that Alice wanted to work with. Now remember, they're limited to the burlap that's sold at their local store. She hemmed the burlap to keep it from unraveling. And you do see this if you pick up old vintage pieces. It's just folded over, almost like ironed or finger pressed, and just stitched down like a running stitch, just to prevent it from, you know, I do this on the, obviously, sewing machine now. I do it with a zigzag stitch. I prefer it to the overlock or the serger machine, but everybody does it differently. You can't let the thing unravel is the main thing. So she would hem her burlap, and then he said, I would draw the design on burlap on the backing and keep it simple, a black outline with an indelible marker. So again, if you're doing this process, it has got to be a Sharpie. It has got to be, I would say, a black Sharpie, because the other colors do bleed, could bleed, will bleed, but not black. So he's doing the same thing, an indelible marker. We would bring up from her basement all the shades and colors we thought that we might use in the next stage of the hooking. And as I selected, she would cut a small strip and hook it into the area of the rug that was to be used. And you see this a lot too with older rugs when you get estates or people who are not hooking or who have passed away. May they rest in peace. All of that stuff. You know, you see like an unfinished, for example, Proma gown, and one little noodle like looped into it as a guide, because they already thought the color planning through and thought tea rose goes here, wild rose goes here, hyacinth goes here, whatever. But they figured it out and they put those things in place so they didn't have to think about it multiple times. It's a good use of time. Alice did this too. And he says, I always stood in awe of her laborious cutting of the cloth into strips. This took a great deal of time and required the knowledge and judgment to know exactly how narrow they could be cut and still hold together and not unravel. We talked about this recently. It's very hard to tell, particularly with recycled fabric, from one to the next, one woolen to the next, how that weave is going to handle, how it's going to behave. Some of them have a remarkable amount of sort of tenacity and integrity, and others that look like they would be strong and bold and sturdy just fall into atoms in your hand. So it's funny that he's saying Alice seemed to have a kind of intuition about being able to cut them to the right width. So she really had the touch and the feel for it. She was very good at the mechanical side of it. And Vic is very good at the creative side of it. And I always come back to this, talking and teaching, you know, everybody in them has a different ratio. What is your ratio of technical versus creative? Because if you are for example, of the Canadian School of Rug Hookers, who do sort of wild and free, different heights of pile, different textures, different thicknesses. That is like 100% creative, not super technical. But then there are people who love to do the very even pile nap, very, very sort of Pearl McGowan school of perfection. Those people are obviously much more creative, interested in the creative side, technical side more than the creative side. So for each person, you have to know for yourself what part you enjoy and accept that your rugs will be a reflection of the part that not only you enjoy, but you are good at. If you force yourself to do the part that you're not good at, for example, the technical part, you won't enjoy it as much. And if you force yourself to do creative things that you feel like you're going out on a limb on, you don't feel confident enough about, you won't enjoy that. You want the more technical stuff and you want to stay within this sort of realm. So it's good to be aware of that. And in this case, I think we're talking about like a John Lennon, Paul McCartney kind of rug hooking fusion, where the son is very, very good at the creative and the mother's very, very good at the technical. And it sounds like neither of them would be very good at the other thing. So it was wonderful that they had each other to work with in a team kind of situation. So he was always in awe of the way that she cut the strips. The width of the strip depended on the tightness of the weave, right? Although I believe there was a fabric strip cutting machine available at the time, and there was, she preferred to cut them by hand with regular scissors. And amen to that. We spend way too much money right now looking for new things to buy that are super, super, super expensive. Using a pair of scissors is great. Using a rotary cutter is great. It's still great. It still works. As I began to become more involved with my own career in Seattle, I had less time for making trips to Tacoma. Now, this is inevitable, right? To help keep Alice supplied with patterns, I designed a quantity of templates cut from heavy paper for Alice and Merle to use. Now, isn't this nice? He's like setting them up while he's away so that they can keep going with projects. These templates were paper patterns which they could then trace. I'm not showing you all the pictures and stuff because I'm hoping that you will find the book and want the book. I don't want to spoil all of it for you, but the pictures are wonderful too. I'll show you a lot more. So they would trace these templates, which essentially were stencils, Edward Sands Frost style. He would trace them with a marker onto the burlap. I got to show you the picture before because it's kind of an example. Well, this is more like him drawing freehand onto the... Do not go down the stairs with the sheet over your head, please. That's a good way to... You know what?
But the sheet's not over my head.
Do not go down the stairs with the sheet over your head.
The sheet's not on my head.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. You can see there's some serious button pushing going on today. The templates were largely leaf and flower figures. Shut the door, I'm doing a show. I should have set up somewhere else, right? The templates were largely leaf and flower figures. Eventually, Alice made designs of her own. And Merle did as well. So both Merle and Alice began designing when Vic goes away, out of necessity. And he says their collaborations were very successful. Later in our work, we decided that it would be a good idea. Now, isn't it nice that he is regarding what they're doing as a family as their work? Because it really is special and important, and it should be regarded as work. He's not considering it his mom's hobby. It's not like he's indulging her. He considers it work, and he considers it important. Later in our work, we decided it would be a good idea to sign the rugs. We signed HB. Now, this is important if you find them, particularly if you live out west. HB, that's Hugo-Butler. So that's Vic and Alice on rugs that I worked with jointly with Alice. For rugs that Alice created alone, she just used the letter B for Butler. So no HB for Hugo Butler, just B. And for those designed with Merle's help, she signed those, are you ahead of me? BB, for the two Butlers, right? Husband and wife, Alice and Merle, BB. So you get HB, B alone, or BB. These are things that you want to look for because there are 3 rugs that are missing. We'll come to that in a minute. And she said, and the way that they were signed, they joined the letters together like a cattle brand, right? That kind of a logo. They're touching each other. So you're not getting 2 separate letters, something to remember and look out for. So interesting. The photograph above, I'll show you this, shows Alice's workroom in Tacoma in the early 1980s. Remember, she stops hooking in the 1980s when health-wise she just can't anymore. Pieces of blue fabric are waiting to be cut into strips, and Alice's hook has been poked into the burlap to hold it until it's needed. Let me show you that. That is so, it's so nice to see the way other people work. So this is her workroom in the 1980s. Let's see if we can come more in focus. And here's her hook stabbing into the fabric, and here's her blues that she cut out of some garment ready to cut with the scissors. And that's the frame that Merle made her. Which is a good size, considerable frame. You can see it is not a comb frame. They're using tacks. And again, why not? Tacks work. Occasionally you see a frame. If you're going to Whispering Hill later in the month to Donna's, Donna's rug hooking store in Woodstock, Connecticut, she does have frames that do not have combs on them. They have tacks. And you can add more tacks. And there's no reason on earth why you shouldn't work that way. You do not have to buy a frame, a super expensive frame with the combs, right? Like the carpet strips. You can use tacks the way that Alice did, the way many people still do. And of course, when you buy a frame that does not have the combs, because the combs are what make the frame so expensive. Half of the value of the frame is those stupid combs. So if you end up as a beginner getting a frame that does not have the combs, you are going to be getting a really inexpensive frame, and then you just use thumbtacks. Use a little hammer to get them right in there. But why shouldn't you? It works great. It's what Alice always did. So he says, I've always been impressed by the pieces that Alice designed by herself, as well as designed by Merle. Their designs seemed to grow very naturally out of the work that I had done using these templates, and were developed beautifully. This resulted in a consistency of design that I find both delightful and gratifying. I've come to realize that in the end, we were all three painting with clothing remnants. So that is the last of his sort of creative talk in this book, still at the beginning of the book. I think that is really beautiful that as a much older man, he is remembering the work that they did and calling it painting with leftover rags and strips of, and he really over the years still holds the memory of these days of creating together and making these pieces in such high esteem. And I think it is so sweet the way that he was really careful to leave templates and to keep an eye on the fact that they could keep going with this creative work while he could not be there. He really set them up for success. And that's what you want to do when you care about somebody, whether it's a customer or a family member. You want to set people up for success. You don't want to give them the cheapest and worst things and set them up for failure and difficulty in an uphill battle. He seems like, I'm not sure what his status is, because this book, again, was written in 2014, and he was going to college in the early 1940s. But I've put some probes out again with the family, and I'm hoping to hear back from them because I'd like to hear a lot more about the family. And he goes on to talk about the care of rugs, and he talks about how he rolls up rugs into large garbage bags, airtight, so that there's no chance of moths or bugs or anything getting in there when he's not using them. And then he goes into detail about how they mounted their rugs, which is a little more technical, and the success that they had, for example, with Ramona Sahlberg in the mid-1950s, putting things up in galleries. He talks a bit about that 1950s, 1955, different shows that happened, 1956, the Northwest Crafts at the Henry Art Gallery, the University of Washington. He talks about different places that their rugs showed over the years, and he's very proud of that. Now, I want to look at some rugs because the rest of the book, just the beginning of the book, is what we've talked about so far. Hardly anything in all of this are the rugs, right? The 35 rugs with text on the facing page. So he says there are 2 wall hangings which are of special significance to our family. I'm going to show you those first. One of them is called Fish Kite, which contains strips of 2 family heirloom fabrics. So let's look at Fish Kite now. This is Fish Kite. Isn't that gorgeous? It's just what you would think, right? But more gorgeous, like a catfish. Isn't that something? I mean, isn't that something? So of this, he says, it's 32 by 58. The concept for this design came from the fish kites and the Japanese fly on their Boys' Day festival. I have more on that another time from one of the quilt books I have that I just love. I need to share with you another time. But from the Boys' Day festival, this is our heirloom rug. Some of the gray used in the background is from a pair of gray flannel slacks I wore to class at the University of Southern California. Some of the white is from a remnant Alice had of a homespun blanket made by one of her forebears, probably a great-grandmother on the Pelton side of the family. Alice told me that her ancestor had raised the sheep, sheared and carded the wool, spun it into thread, and then had the thread woven into a blanket. So this piece, Fish Kite, includes clothing he wore in his college days and this sort of ancestral era blanket that they have broken into strips and used for that. I think that is extraordinary. So that's one of them. Another one that's important to him personally is called Chicken Family. He says, which I designed to celebrate the birth of Alice's first grandson, Rob Higo, the co-creator of this book. So let's look at Chicken Family. I already looked at it. It is so good. Chicken Family. Isn't that? I mean, talk about modernist, right? Talk about modernist. Oh, Martha says, oh, let me check the messages here. May 5th is Boys' Day or Children's Day in Japan. How nice is that? How nice is that to celebrate the boys? Is there also a Girls' Day? I'm not being a feminist or, I'm just curious because I think that is so nice, not to celebrate an individual person, but to celebrate a whole group of people. Particularly kids who don't get enough, I think, recognition for being little grown-ups, right? Interesting, and a lot of gifts thrown at them. It's nice to have a day where you're just flying kites and celebrating boys in general. And Martha says, our grandson is part Japanese and celebrates Boys' Day too. Very colorful flags with fish are used to decorate the house. How nice is that? And Cass says, we need to talk. So, Chicken Family, and again, this was made when the grandson was born, and there we have a little, but I mean, look at the shape of the chickens, right? This is why we know Vic is like proper artist. This is very early, this is still 40s, I think. This is still 40s, if this is chronologically correct. Look at the kind of tree, leaves, the sun, the way the sun is radiating, the little white flowers in the background, the way he's carried the sun's rays out to meet the edges of, the border. Really, really, really good sort of peacock style flowers. And again, layers, because they're always conscious of running out of material. Layers. It just doesn't get any better than this. I mean, it just doesn't. I think this is an extraordinary piece. The little dots of gray on the ground. So graphic, Linda, right? And just the shape. The little round chicks. Just the shape. It's just extraordinary. So of this, he says, my brother Rob and I spent so much of our childhood on our Uncle Russ's chicken ranch in Southern California. As a consequence, we both loved chickens. I especially loved the pair of free-roaming buff banties I had as pets. When my brother's first son, Rob, was born in August 1971. Okay, so this is actually 70s. This is 1971. I can't imagine that this is chronological because he shows us one after this from the 40s. We'll figure it out later. Was born in 1971, 2 months before my father's death in October. I designed this piece to commemorate the event of Rob's birth. It would have been completed the following year, 1972, that's the year I was born, or possibly 1973. My intention then was to design a new and special wall hanging for every child my brother fathered, even though I had already missed doing one for Carol, the firstborn. The project got away from me somehow, and this remains the only nephew work. That's just the way life is, isn't it? Someone observed that the chicks represent all 4 of my brother's children, Carol, Rob, Conrad, and Russ. This is a lovely thought. I love how personal this book is. So he feels like he didn't sort of honor the birth of all of the children, and yet by coincidence he did, or by destiny he did, right? Just absolutely beautiful. It has a touch of, the artist Shaggy, right? The sort of like tiki kind of artist. It doesn't have the feel of that. It's much warmer. It's, for me, much better. But that kind of look, the breakdown of color, very graphic, very Hanna-Barbera too, right? Which makes a lot of sense if it's a 1971 piece. So let's see. And then I don't want to miss any of the ones that he... Okay, whereas the first rug was completed in 1942 or 1943, I don't know for certain the date of the last completed piece Alice and I collaborated on. Irises, and I'll show you this in a second, he's saying possibly irises. So let's look at page 68. I feel like this is a choose your own adventure book. Okay, so this, he's saying this might be the last one that they did. This does look a lot more contemporary. This does look like it could have been and should have been in Rug Cooking Magazine or on the cover in the 1980s, right? Easily. Still very graphic and different color choice. Reminds me a little bit of, do you remember the episode we did on George Wells from Long Island, another mid-century designer? Remember the black and white photo of him standing on the beach, drawing in the sand with a long stick to come up with his rug designs? Reminds me a bit of his color and his sort of, his work, his graphics. This is 36 by 40, so this is a real standard shape for them. This is the last completed piece I designed for Alice. It probably dates to the mid-80s. Alice said to me one day, "I have a great quantity of green and purple fabric to use up. Make a design for me so I can begin using it. This wall hanging is the result." So at this point, I'm sure Vic is well into his own life and his own work. So that kind of bookmarks the timeline for us. Because yesterday, remember, the poppy rug is their first, and that is lost to time. And that is their last. So those are really good bookends. And he says, Alice always worked with solid colored fabrics until the time that I asked her to try using a red and black plaid from a shirt to see what the result would look like. This was when we were planning a red and black rug called Parade. I'm going to show you this rug. The result was quite successful. Some of the later rugs show that she experimented with other patterned fabrics on her own. So let me show you Parade. But isn't that interesting that she's not using any patterned fabrics? He really encourages her to use red and black flannel from a shirt to do this piece, Parade. Very, very Matisse, right? It looks very sort of Chagall, Matisse, that kind of collage-driven composition. Absolutely beautiful. But you can see he obviously wanted something that was very limited color-wise. But they managed to put in, I think, some solids, and obviously the very extreme white and black, that really, really pop the plaid shirt, right? There's the darker and the lighter parts to the plaid shirt. Those would have been, you know, when you look at a plaid, some of the stripes are darker, some of the stripes are lighter. And Alice obviously divided those pieces up. You know, have you ever seen anybody do this before with a plaid? Because you often work with plaids and sort of herringbones and different kinds of checks in rug hooking, but you usually put all of it in the whole background. Have you ever seen anybody before Alice actually divide the plaid up into dark and light and use it that way? Because you get a great result if you take the time. And notice how they even put the solid red stars behind the patterned parts. I mean, it's so different. Isn't it different? So of this, he says, my partner, Roy Schoenwill, loved this piece so much that Alice gave it to him. It lived on the floor next to his bed until his death. This design is comprised of figures, banners, and fireworks. Noteworthy is the fact that I asked Alice to see what would result from working with the strips of wool cut from red and black lumberjack shirts. You can see the successful result of this piece. I have written more about Roy in the notes on page 82. Let's just do a choose your own adventure and go to that to see more about Roy. Let's see. Oh, you know, this is like a breakdown of all of the people in this book. So let's do this at the end. Oh, these are going to be some great photos at the end. Let's do that at the end. We are already over. Let me just make sure we've looked at the rugs that were really different, and then we're going to take a general look at the more of the rugs tomorrow. I want to do all rugs tomorrow because the commentary is pretty much done as far as what Vic wrote. He says, during our family research, he was looking at family records for this book, we uncovered old photographs of 3 rugs. This is where I'll end, which seem to be lost. We have no idea where they are, if in fact they still exist. Our best guess is that Alice gave them away. Several friends had asked to buy one, like over the years, but she was never willing to sell. although she may have given these away as gifts. So these are the lost rugs. These are rugs that he found in photographs, and he could not account for anymore. So let me show you the rugs first, because these are exceptional rugs. This one here has the then family cat on it. Let me bring it in. The first rug. So remember, the first rug is the poppy rug, but they're just calling this one the first rug, and that is a photograph of a cat. Right, that looks very, who's that artist? Something Ivory, right, that does such realistic cats that it almost looks like that. But the rug is a photograph, and the cat is too. Not part of the rug. Beautiful. And then this one, I think, is extraordinary, tulips. That has that real pen Dutch look, right? Almost like a hex on a barn kind of a thing. Absolutely beautiful. And again, using yellows, right? He obviously loved to use the yellows. But look at the use of, with such light colors, like such a light color palette, the nice tulips, but look at the use of the dark little flowers, like the little dots of flower, right? All of these little guys, very, very dark. If this were your piece sitting in front of you, would you choose this dark, dark, dark color to put all those flowers? I don't think I intuitively would, but now that I've seen this, I would have to rethink that, because I think that is a super successful. Let me put the sword ferns this way. Sword ferns, I think, is one of my favorites in the entire book, because we see a lot of this plant called sword ferns in, heirloom, McGowan type patterns. But this is something else. This is another example of him spinning the central motif, right? The sword ferns are not the way that you'd expect to find them, dropping in all of these different kinds of leaves. And look at his use of blocking white into the background. Also, look at the sword ferns, the way that color-wise they're split in half. It's very, very, very good. Now this is a B, so this, I shouldn't say he, because B means that it's just Alice, right? B, just for Butler, is just Alice, not with Merle, not with Vic. So this is just Alice. You know, this makes me wonder whether he gave her, remember how we just read, he gave her a lot of plant and flower and leaf templates. What do you bet that she drew the sword ferns, right? That was a very popular motif, middle 20th century. And I would bet you anything that she took those templates that Vic gave her and dropped them into the background to do those. Don't you think? What else makes sense, right? Because we know she had the pile of leaf templates, and we know she did this one on her own. So I just think that's amazing. Those are the 3 lost, am I upside down now? Those are the 3 lost rugs. So, hey, if you see these about or on an auction, by all means buy the rug first. Oh, Leaning Tower of Pisa, there it goes. By all means buy the rug first, but then tell us and share with us if you find them, because this is now a piece of history. I mean, that it's a piece of their family history. But whoever the rugs went to, Alice wanted them to go to. So that part's okay for me. It would just be nice to know where they are. Those are the lost rugs. So let's start tomorrow's episode. I want to run it again at 10 tomorrow, only because I'm staying with my mom, and I would like to do something with the kids during the day that's worthwhile. So I don't want to split the day in half. So let's do 10 again tomorrow, and I want to pick up tomorrow with just looking at their collection of rugs. I want you to see what some of these look like, and remember how Vic does say he feels that as a designer, as an artist, he really grew with time and his work changed. And so tomorrow I want to focus on the collection of rugs, but looking at them in terms of how the design evolves, and picking out which rugs are just Alice's rugs, which ones are combos with Merle and Vic. I love this subject. I love this family so much. Yeah, I just can't get enough of it. I just keep staring at the rugs and thinking about how smart they were. Because if you think about it, and I'm not putting anybody or any company ever down, anything to do with rug hooking, you know, is my passion and my love. But I would say, if you look at a collection of, for example, a Pearl McGowan catalog from the same period in an heirloom, let's say, from Providence, they're very similar designs. They're very similar designs. These designs are very different. Very. And they are using sword ferns, and they are using medallions, and they are using tulips and roses, but they are doing something completely different. And it's like, how does that even where do you even begin, right? you're just sitting thinking about a sword fern, and then you create something that Alice created on her own with all the leaves behind. So interesting and so inspiring. You know, we should do that this year. We should try, wherever you are, whatever kind of leaves you can get a hold of, we should try doing like a sit down, not a class, I don't think it constitutes a class, but doing a design, maybe like Alice's with the sword fern, and then putting all our leaves around the sides of it. Wouldn't that be fun to do together? That could be a project that we work on together. Oh, Catherine, I'm glad. Me too. I feel so rooted right now. And I know when I take the kids over to the pond, they're going to be harassing me to get in the water and freeze to death until my lips turn blue. But while I'm on the edge of death, I'm sure I'll be thinking about patterns and sword ferns and all of the things that come out of this book, because they're just, it's like a wave of happiness. It's a wave of interest. Opening this book up. So let's go back to it tomorrow and actually look at the collection of rugs. Until then, have a great day. Say a little prayer for me that I survive the extreme cold that will be the pond on a gray day like today. Even the other day when I went, and I just thought I was going to just seize up and die. But you know, have you ever read that Catherine, I almost said Audrey, Katharine Hepburn, every day of her life as an adult, including winter, would jump into the lake on the property where she lived and swim in every season. And when I go into cold water, I think about that, how elegant she was and how beautiful she was. And I think, I guess it doesn't kill you, right? We'll see. I'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Have a great afternoon. Be busy, be productive, and we will look forward to looking at more of the most beautiful hooked rugs that have ever been created. I will see you then.